The massive council chamber stretched out like a metal cathedral. Commander Zara Chen sat in her small chair, surrounded by beings that looked like they came from nightmares and dreams. To her left, the Vextai representatives sparkled like a living diamond, each facet of their crystal body catching the artificial light. Across from her, the Zephyrian ambassador looked like a walking cloud of silver smoke, constantly shifting and whispering to itself in 1,000 tiny voices. Chen felt very small and very human. The chamber held representatives from 12 different alien species. Each one had ruled space for thousands of years before humans even learned to make fire. The walls showed holographic displays of star maps that covered more territory than the human mind could easily understand. Ships the size of cities moved between worlds that humans had only dreamed about 50 years ago. Now Chen was here, the only human allowed to speak for all of humanity in the Galactic Confederation. "We come now to the matter of mining rights in the outer spiral territories," announced the session leader, a floating energy being called a luminal. Its voice sounded like music played through water. The asteroid belt designated as Sector 77 Alpha contains significant gravitonium deposits. Chen straightened in her chair. This was why she was here. The asteroid belt contained enough gravitonium to power human space travel for the next 1,000 years. Gravitonium made faster than light travel possible. Without it, humans would be stuck in their small corner of the galaxy forever. She had prepared for this moment for months. Her team of scientists had studied the sector, analyzed the mineral content, and calculated extraction possibilities. The data was solid. Humanity deserved a chance. The Confederation recognizes the territorial claims of the Zephyrian Collective, the Luminal continued. However, as per standard procedure, we will hear from all interested parties. Chen stood up. Around her, the alien representatives seemed to grow larger, their attention pressing down on her like a weight. She cleared her throat and began to speak. "Honored representatives," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Humanity formally requests consideration for joint mining operations in Sector 77 Alpha. We offer our labor force, our technological expertise in dangerous environment operations, and our commitment to sustainable extraction practices." The Vextai representative, Shardsinger Velthera, made a sound like breaking glass. In the translation device in Chen's ear, it came out as laughter. "The newcomers speak," Velthera said, their crystal body flashing with colors that Chen's briefing materials told her meant amusement and contempt. 50 years in space, and they believe they understand mining operations that require millennia of experience. More sounds filled the chamber. The Zephyrian Collective whispered among themselves in their 1,000 voices, creating a sound like wind through metal trees. The energy beings pulsed with what Chen assumed was their version of laughter. Even the slug-like Mortani, usually silent, made wet, bubbling sounds that somehow felt mocking. "Perhaps," continued Velthera, "the humans should observe for a few more centuries before presuming to have opinions worth hearing. We have been extracting gravitonium since before their species learned to work metal. What could they possibly offer that we have not already mastered?" The Zephyrian ambassador High Voice Corthus added their input. Their smoky form swirled faster as they spoke. "The human emotion-driven decision-making is well documented. They lack the patience for long-term resource management. Better to leave such important work to species with proven track records." Chen felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she kept her expression calm. Around her, the other representatives made their species versions of agreeable sounds. They were enjoying this. The newest members of the Confederation being put in their place. "We acknowledge," Chen said carefully, "that humanity is new to galactic civilization. However, our experience in hostile environment mining on Earth and our outer planets has given us unique perspectives on efficient extraction in dangerous conditions." This brought another wave of what passed for laughter among the aliens. Dangerous conditions. The Mortani representative spoke for the first time, their voice a wet gurgle. "Your species has never dealt with true danger. You mine rocks in safe systems under the protection of stable stars. The outer spiral operates under different rules." Velthera's crystal body rang like a bell as they gestured dismissively. "The human definition of patience spans decades. Our operations require planning that spans centuries. They simply cannot think on the timescales necessary for this kind of work." Chen remained standing, but she said nothing. The alien representatives continued their discussion as if she wasn't there. They talked about extraction rates, processing facilities, and worker deployment. They mentioned the gravitonium as if it was already theirs. the luminal energy being floated higher, preparing to call for a vote. Unless there are any other substantive contributions to this discussion, Chen knew this was her last chance. She could make another argument, present more data, try to convince them that humans deserved a place in this operation. But looking around the chamber, she saw the truth in their body language, their energy patterns, their crystalline formations. They had already decided. This hearing was just a formality. Instead, she did something that surprised everyone, including herself. "I understand your position," she said, her voice carrying across the sudden quiet of the chamber. "We will wait." The silence stretched on for several seconds. The aliens exchanged glances, energy pulses, and chemical signals that roughly translated to confusion. "You withdraw your claim?" asked Velthara, their crystal form shifting to colors that meant surprise. "We withdraw our formal request for joint operations," Chen confirmed. "Humanity recognizes the wisdom of the Confederation's more experienced members. We will observe and learn." The Zephyrian collective whispered among themselves, their 1,000 voices creating a sound like distant rain. Korthus spoke for them all. "This is unexpected and wise. Perhaps there is hope for the newcomers after all." The Luminal called for the vote. It was unanimous, as Chen had known it would be. The Zephyrian collective received full mining rights to Sector 77 Alpha. The gravitonium that could have powered human civilization for a millennium would instead flow into alien hands. Chen sat down and watched the celebration. Energy beings pulsed with satisfaction. Crystal formations rang with harmonious notes. The Zephyrians swirled faster, their collective consciousness pleased with their new acquisition. But if any of them had been paying attention to human body language, they might have noticed something in Chen's stillness, something in the way she sat perfectly straight, hands folded, eyes alert and calculating, something that wasn't defeat or resignation. It was patience, but not the kind they expected. As the session ended and the representatives began to file out, Velthara approached Chen's station. Their crystal body had shifted to colors that meant something like respect mixed with curiosity. "Commander Chen," they said, their voice like music played on broken glass. "Your species' quick acceptance of this decision shows wisdom. Perhaps humanity will find its place in the Confederation after all." Chen looked up at the towering crystal being. When she spoke, her voice was steady and calm. "Thank you, Ambassador. We humans have a saying. Good things come to those who wait. We're very good at waiting." Something in her tone made Velthara pause. For just a moment, the ancient being felt something they hadn't experienced in centuries, something that might have been uncertainty. But the moment passed and Chen was already gathering her materials, preparing to return to her quarters. Just another human, accepting their place in the greater order of things. As she walked through the corridors of the station, Chen allowed herself a small smile. The aliens thought they understood human patience. They thought they knew what humanity was capable of. They were about to learn how wrong they were. 6 months had passed since the mining rights vote. Commander Chen had become as much a part of the council chamber as the metal walls and floating displays. She attended every session, sat in her small chair, and spoke only when directly asked a question. The other representatives had grown comfortable with her presence. Some had even stopped noticing she was there. This was exactly what Chen wanted. During the sessions, she watched and listened. She learned which species made decisions quickly, and which ones took months to consider simple votes. She discovered that the Vextai loved to show off their computational abilities, while the Zephyrians preferred to work in groups. The energy beings thought they were the wisest, and the Mortani just wanted everyone to leave them alone. Most importantly, she learned that none of them paid attention to human activities outside the council chamber. While the aliens focused on their prize in the outer spiral, human ships moved quietly through space. They called themselves survey vessels, doing routine exploration work. Nothing suspicious, nothing worth watching. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the research ship Discovery, staring at readings that made her stomach twist with worry. The Discovery floated in empty space, light years away from the outer spiral territories. But their long-range sensors could see things that the aliens, busy with their mining operation, had missed. "Run the scan again," she told her team. The results came back the same. Elena rubbed her tired eyes and looked at the data once more. The numbers didn't change. "Captain Morrison," she called to the ship's commander. We need to send a priority message to Earth, and to Commander Chen. Captain Morrison, a veteran of the early exploration missions, moved to stand beside her. What did you find, Doctor? Elena pointed at the holographic display floating between them. It showed the asteroid belt where the Zephyrians were working, but with layers of data that revealed what lay beneath the surface. The gravitonium deposits aren't the only thing in that asteroid belt, she said. There's a dark matter concentration underneath the main field. It's been stable for millions of years, but the mining operation is changing that. Morrison frowned. Changing it how? The gravitonium extraction is creating vibrations in the space-time fabric around the dark matter. Each time they pull out a large chunk of gravitonium, it puts stress on the dark matter structure. Elena manipulated the display, showing a timeline of projected changes. If they keep mining at their current rate, the dark matter will collapse in about 18 months. And if it collapses? Elena's voice was quiet. It'll create a micro-black hole. Everything within 50 light-years gets pulled in. The asteroid belt, the mining stations, the Zephyrian workers, all of it. Morrison was silent for a long moment. Then he asked the question that Elena had been dreading. How many Zephyrians are working in that belt? Current estimates put it at about 2.5 million individuals. The captain sat down heavily in his chair. 2.5 million people are going to die, and they don't even know it. Elena nodded. The Zephyrians are so excited about the gravitonium that they're not scanning for other anomalies. Their sensors are focused on finding more deposits, not checking for dangerous side effects. We have to warn them. That's not our decision to make, Elena said, though it clearly pained her to say it. We need to report this to Earth and let the politicians figure out what to do. The message traveled through quantum communications to Earth, where it landed on the desk of President Sarah Chen in the middle of the night. Sarah was Zara's older sister, and she understood immediately why this discovery was both a crisis and an opportunity. She called an emergency meeting of the Human High Command, the room filled with generals, scientists, and diplomats, all looking grim as Elena's data played on the main screen. So let me understand this, said General Martinez, head of the Space Force. The aliens who just humiliated our representative are sitting on top of a bomb that's going to go off in 18 months. That's correct, said Dr. Williams, Elena's supervisor. The irony is that if they had accepted our proposal for joint mining operations, our safety protocols would have detected this problem within the first week. We have to warn them, said Secretary of State Johnson. 2.5 million lives are at stake. Do we? Asked General Martinez. They made it very clear that they don't value human input. Maybe this is a lesson they need to learn on their own. The room erupted in argument. Some believed humanity had a moral obligation to warn the Confederation, regardless of how they had been treated. Others felt that the aliens had made their choice and should live with the consequences. President Chen listened to both sides, then opened a secure channel to her sister on the Confederation station. Zara, she said when her sister's face appeared on the screen. I assume you've seen Elena's report? I have, Zara replied. And I know what you're thinking. We could warn them directly. Make them understand that human science detected something their advanced sensors missed. It would prove our worth. But, Sarah knew her sister well enough to hear the hesitation. But they mocked our timeline perspective. They said we don't understand long-term planning. Maybe it's time to show them what human patience really looks like. Sarah leaned forward. What do you have in mind? Zara's expression was calm, but there was something dangerous in her eyes. We warn them, but we do it our way, on our timeline following their rules. We make them figure it out themselves. That's risky. What if they don't figure it out in time? Then we save them anyway, Zara said simply. But first we let them understand what it means to underestimate human intelligence. The plan that emerged from that conversation was elegant in its simplicity. Human survey ships already scattered throughout local space would begin detecting unusual readings, not in the outer spiral itself, but in systems that surrounded it. Each detection would be reported through proper channels, following every bureaucratic procedure the Confederation required. The reports would start subtle. Anomalous gravitational waves in a system 30 light-years away. Unusual dark matter readings in another sector. Energy signatures that didn't match known phenomena. Each report would be filed correctly, distributed to the appropriate scientific committees and largely ignored. But a pattern would emerge. Anyone who bothered to look at all the reports together would see what the humans had discovered. The question was whether alien arrogance would blind them to the source of the information. Chen began the campaign 2 weeks later. The first report came from a human survey ship near the edge of Confederation space. It described gravitational anomalies that suggested dark matter instability in distant systems. The report was dry, technical, and boring. Most of the alien representatives didn't even read it, but Chen filed it properly, distributed it according to regulations, and waited. The second report came a month later. This time it was energy readings that suggested space-time distortions caused by large-scale mining operations. Again, the report was technical and seemed unrelated to anything important. Velthara, the Vextai representative, read this one. Their crystal-based computational abilities made them naturally curious about scientific anomalies. But they dismissed the human data as primitive and probably wrong. Chen filed the second report and waited. The third report described theoretical models for dark matter collapse triggered by gravitonium extraction. Chen presented it during a council session as if it was an academic exercise, something human scientists were working on to better understand space-time physics. Most of the representatives ignored it completely, but Velthara began to pay attention, not because they believed the human science was correct, but because their computational mind couldn't help but analyze the mathematics. The numbers, they had to admit, were elegant. Chen finished her presentation and sat down. Around her, the aliens continued their regular business, but she could see Velthara's crystal form flickering with calculation patterns. The seed was planted. Now came the hard part, waiting. 8 months had passed since Chen began her careful campaign of scientific reports. The pattern was becoming clear to anyone who bothered to look, but alien pride was a powerful force. Each species believed their own science was superior to anything humans could produce. In the outer spiral, the Zephyrian mining operation had grown massive. Thousands of their worker drones moved through the asteroid belt like a silver swarm, breaking apart rocks and extracting gravitonium with mechanical precision. Their collective consciousness hummed with satisfaction as the precious material flowed into their storage facilities. Hive voice Korthas floated near the main processing station, their smoky forms swirling with contentment. The operation was ahead of schedule. They had already extracted enough gravitonium to power their fleets for the next 500 years. And they were barely getting started. The humans were wise to withdraw their claim, Korthas whispered to themselves in their 1,000 voices. This work requires patience and precision that their emotional species could never provide. If the Zephyrian collective had been paying attention to anything other than their mining quotas, they might have noticed the subtle changes happening in the space around them, small gravitational shifts, tiny alterations in the way light bent as it passed through certain areas, signs that something deep beneath the asteroid field was beginning to stir. But they were focused on their prize, and the signs were easy to miss. On the Confederation station, Chen continued her routine. She attended every council session, filed her reports, and waited. Her latest presentation had been particularly detailed, a comprehensive analysis of how large-scale gravitonium extraction could theoretically destabilize dark matter formations. She had presented it as pure academic research, the kind of theoretical work that human scientists did to better understand the universe. Most of the representatives had paid no attention at all, but Velthara had listened to every word. The Vextai ambassador's crystal form flickered constantly now, running calculations at the edge of their computational capacity. The human mathematics was surprisingly sophisticated. The theoretical models were elegant and internally consistent. The predictions were specific and testable, and they all pointed to the same terrifying conclusion. Velthara faced a problem that went beyond simple physics. Their pride was at stake. For thousands of years, the Vextai had been considered the greatest mathematicians and scientists in the galaxy. Their crystalline minds could process calculations that would take other species years to complete. The idea that a primitive human had detected something they had missed was almost impossible to accept, but the numbers didn't. Velthara began running their own calculations, using Vextai computational methods to verify the human theories. They started with the assumption that the humans were wrong, that their primitive science had led them to incorrect conclusions. The results were not what Velthara wanted to see. Every calculation confirmed what the human reports had suggested. The dark matter concentration beneath the outer spiral asteroid belt was becoming unstable. The Zephyrian mining operation was creating exactly the kind of gravitational stress that could trigger a catastrophic collapse. Worse, the timeline matched the human predictions almost perfectly. 18 months from the start of major extraction operations, the dark matter would reach critical instability. When it collapsed, it would create a black hole that would consume everything within 50 light-years, including the Confederation's primary fleet base, which was only 30 light-years away. Belthara spent weeks verifying their calculations, hoping to find an error that would prove the humans wrong, but their crystal mind was too precise, too logical to ignore mathematical truth. The humans were right. This created a new problem. If Belthara warned the Confederation, they would have to admit that human science had detected a threat that Vextai sensors had missed. It would be an admission that their species' supposed superiority was built on arrogance rather than actual ability. But if they said nothing, millions would die. Belthara made their choice. They called for a closed session of the Confederation Council, excluding human representation. When the other ambassadors gathered, their crystal form was flickering with patterns that indicated extreme agitation. "Honored colleagues," Belthara began, "I have discovered a significant threat to Confederation operations in the outer spiral." The other representatives paid attention immediately. The Vextai rarely showed emotion, and they never called emergency sessions without good reason. "Our ongoing calculations have revealed instabilities in the space-time fabric surrounding the gravitonium extraction zone," Belthara continued. "The mining operations may be triggering a cascade effect that could result in dark matter collapse." Korthus swirled faster, their collective consciousness suddenly focused. "What kind of collapse?" "The formation of a micro-black hole," Belthara said. "Current projections suggest this could occur within the next 4 months." The chamber erupted. Energy beings pulsed with alarm. The Mortani made distressed gurgling sounds. The other crystalline species rang like broken bells. "How did we miss this?" demanded the luminal session leader. Belthara's form flickered with colors that indicated careful consideration. The threat was hidden beneath the gravitonium deposits. Our sensors were focused on mineral detection, not deep space anomaly scanning. The mathematical models required specific theoretical frameworks that we had not previously considered necessary. This was technically true, while avoiding the embarrassing fact that humans had figured it out months ago. "What do our scientists recommend?" asked the Mortani representative. "Immediate evacuation of all personnel from the extraction zone," Belthara said. "Suspension of mining operations until the dark matter can be stabilized." Korthus's 1,000 voices created a sound like a windstorm. "Evacuation? We have 2.5 million workers in that system. The logistics alone would take months." "Then we must begin immediately," Belthara replied. The luminal floated higher, their energy form pulsing with authority. "This council will authorize emergency evacuation protocols. All Confederation resources will be mobilized to assist in the operation." As the aliens planned their response to the crisis, none of them mentioned the human reports that had been predicting exactly this scenario for the past 8 months. None of them acknowledged that primitive human science had detected a threat that their advanced sensors had missed. But in her quarters on the station, Chen received a message from her sister on Earth. "Zara," President Chen said from the secure communication screen, "our deep space monitoring stations are picking up increased activity in the outer spiral. It looks like the Confederation is finally taking action." "About time," Zara replied. "Belthara figured it out 3 weeks ago. I've been watching their computational patterns during council sessions. They've been running verification calculations non-stop. Are they going to be able to evacuate everyone in time?" Zara was quiet for a moment. "Not with their current resources. The Zephyrian Collective is huge, but their evacuation ships are designed for planned relocations, not emergency rescues. They'll need help. Our help, if they're smart enough to ask for it." Sarah Chen leaned back in her chair. "And if they're not?" Zara's expression was calm, but her sister could see the determination underneath. "Then we help them anyway, but we make sure they understand exactly who's doing the helping." The next morning, Chen entered the council chamber to find chaos. Representatives were flashing, pulsing, and swirling with agitation as they tried to coordinate the massive evacuation effort. The logistics were staggering. Moving 2.5 million beings across interstellar distances required resources that even the mighty Confederation found challenging. Chen took her usual seat and waited. Around her, the aliens struggled with problems that human space agencies had been solving for decades: emergency evacuation procedures, long-range transport logistics, rescue operations in hostile environments. Finally, the Luminol session leader turned their attention to the human representative. "Commander Chen," they said, their musical voice carrying undertones of reluctance. "Does humanity possess any resources that might assist in this evacuation effort?" Chen stood up slowly. Around her, 12 alien species that had mocked human capabilities now looked to her for help. "Yes," she said simply. "We do." Chen stood in the council chamber as 12 different species waited for her answer. The irony was thick enough to cut with a knife. The same aliens who had mocked humanity's capabilities 8 months ago now needed human help to save millions of lives. "Our deep space rescue fleets can be mobilized within 6 hours, Chen said, her voice carrying across the suddenly quiet chamber. "We have 47 heavy transport ships currently positioned in nearby systems, and another 23 rapid response vessels specifically designed for emergency evacuations." Velthara's crystal form flickered with surprise. "Positioned in nearby systems? For what purpose?" Chen's expression didn't change. "Routine patrol and exploration missions. However, these ships can be repurposed for evacuation operations if needed." What she didn't mention was that those ships had been routinely patrolling in positions that would allow rapid response to an emergency in the outer spiral. What looked like scattered exploration missions had actually been careful preparation for exactly this moment. Korthus swirled faster, their collective consciousness calculating rapidly. "Human transport capacity. How many individuals can your ships evacuate per trip?" "Our heavy transports can carry 50,000 beings each under emergency conditions," Chen replied. "The rapid response vessels can handle 10,000 each. Total capacity per evacuation run would be approximately 2.5 million individuals." The chamber fell silent. The numbers were almost too convenient to believe. "You could evacuate our entire operation in a single run?" Korthus asked, their 1,000 voices creating harmonics of disbelief. "If we had sufficient time to coordinate," Chen confirmed. "However, evacuation operations of this scale require careful planning and precise execution. We would need complete access to Zephyrian operational data, including worker distribution, facility locations, and current extraction schedules." The Luminol session leader pulsed with urgency. "Whatever access you require will be provided. When can your ships arrive?" Chen paused as if consulting some internal calculation. "Our fastest vessels can reach the outer spiral in 18 hours. The heavy transports will need 36 hours to arrive. We can begin preliminary evacuations immediately upon arrival." What the aliens didn't know was that human ships were already moving. The orders had been sent the moment Velthara called their emergency session 3 weeks ago. Captain Morrison and the Discovery were already in the outer spiral, coordinating with other human vessels that had been quietly positioning themselves for months. "There is another matter," Chen continued. "Our scientists have been working on theoretical solutions for dark matter stabilization. While evacuation remains the priority, we may be able to prevent the collapse entirely." Velthara's crystal body rang with a sound like shattering glass. "Prevent the collapse? That would require technology that doesn't exist." "Human researchers have been developing experimental approaches to space-time manipulation," Chen said calmly. "The theoretical framework was outlined in several papers we submitted to the Council's scientific committee over the past 8 months. The chamber erupted in noise. Energy beings pulsed with agitation. Crystal forms flickered with rapid calculations. Even the usually silent Mortani made distressed gurgling sounds. Through the chaos, Velthara's voice cut like a blade. "Those papers, those were the theoretical studies you presented during regular sessions?" "Yes," Chen confirmed. "Humanity believes in sharing scientific knowledge with our Confederation partners." The implication hung in the air like a toxic cloud. The humans had been trying to warn them for months. Every dry academic paper, every theoretical study, every mathematical model had been an attempt to guide the Confederation to the truth, and they had ignored it all. Korthus spoke for the entire chamber when they asked, "How long have you known?" Chen's expression remained neutral. "Known what, Ambassador?" "About the dark matter instability. About the threat to our operation. Human deep space monitoring detected unusual readings in systems surrounding the outer spiral approximately 10 months ago, Chen said. Our scientists developed theoretical models to explain these readings, which led to predictions about potential dark matter collapse triggered by large-scale gravitonium extraction. 10 months ago, Velthera whispered, their crystal form flickering with what might have been shame, before we even began major extraction operations. The data was included in our regular scientific reports to the Council, Chen continued. We believe that Confederation scientists, with their superior experience and computational abilities, would recognize the implications and take appropriate action. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, the luminal session leader found their voice. You have been trying to warn us for 10 months. We have been sharing our scientific findings with the Council, as required by Confederation protocols. Chen corrected gently. Any interpretation of that data was left to the appropriate scientific authorities. Velthera made a sound like crystal breaking under pressure. We dismissed your reports as primitive human mathematics. The universe doesn't care about species politics, Chen replied. Dark matter follows the same physical laws regardless of who discovers those laws. Another silence fell over the chamber. Then Cortez asked the question that everyone was thinking. What happens now? Chen looked around the chamber, meeting the gaze of representatives who had spent months treating her as a curiosity at best, an annoyance at worst. Now, she said, we save your people. The next 6 hours transformed the outer spiral from a mining operation into the largest evacuation effort in galactic history. Human ships appeared throughout the system with efficiency that shocked the Confederation observers. What had seemed like scattered exploration vessels revealed themselves as a perfectly coordinated rescue fleet. Captain Morrison coordinated the operation from the Discovery. Transport 7, you're cleared for docking at Mining Platform Alpha. Transport 12, adjust your approach vector by 15 degrees. Rapid Response 4, we're reading hull stress on Section C7. Reduce your passenger load by 2,000. The human ships moved with precision that came from decades of experience with emergency operations. Every captain knew their role. Every crew had trained for exactly this kind of rescue mission. On Mining Platform Alpha, Zephyrian workers watched in amazement as human transport ships docked with their facilities. The humans moved through the stations with calm efficiency, helping evacuate beings they had never met, from a species that had dismissed them as primitive. Why are they helping us? One young Zephyrian asked their supervisor, their smoky form swirling with confusion. Because that's what humans do, the supervisor replied, though they couldn't quite explain how they knew that. Meanwhile, Dr. Elena Vasquez worked frantically in the Discovery's main laboratory. The theoretical framework for dark matter stabilization had become a practical engineering challenge. She had 18 hours before the evacuation was complete, and maybe 6 hours after that before the dark matter reached critical instability. The field generators are in position, reported her chief engineer, but we've never tested this technology on anything larger than laboratory samples. Today we find out if human engineering lives up to human theory, Elena replied, her fingers flying over the control interfaces. In the council chamber, Chen provided regular updates on the evacuation progress. The alien representatives listened with something approaching awe as she described the rescue operation proceeding ahead of schedule. Current evacuation rate is exceeding projections by 12%, she reported. All Zephyrian personnel should be clear of the danger zone within 14 hours. And the stabilization attempt? Asked Velthara, their crystal form flickering with nervous energy. Dr. Vasquez will begin field deployment in 8 hours, Chen replied. Success probability is estimated at 67%. And if it fails? Chen's expression was calm. Then 2.5 million beings will be safe, and we will have learned valuable information about dark matter physics. Velthara stared at the human representative with something approaching wonder. You planned for this, all of it. The evacuation fleet, the stabilization technology, even our refusal to listen to your warnings. We planned for various possibilities, Chen corrected. Humanity has learned that preparation prevents tragedy. Even when that tragedy would have befallen those who had treated you with contempt? Chen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of human history, especially then. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in the Discovery's main laboratory, surrounded by equipment that shouldn't have existed. The dark matter stabilization field generators were based on theoretical physics that human scientists had developed in secret over the past year. No one had ever tried to deploy them on this scale. Field generators Alpha through Delta are in position, reported her engineering team, all systems showing green. Through the laboratory's viewport, Elena could see the massive human transport ships completing their evacuation runs. The last of the Zephyrian workers were being pulled away from the asteroid belt that had become their home for the past 8 months. In 12 hours, the belt would be empty of all intelligent life. It would also be 12 hours closer to complete dark matter collapse. Dr. Vasquez, came Captain Morrison's voice over the communication system. You're clear to begin stabilization procedures. All personnel are at safe distance. Elena took a deep breath and activated the field generators. Around the asteroid belt, 4 massive devices began to emit energy fields that twisted space-time itself. The fields were invisible to most sensors, but their effects rippled through the dark matter concentration like stones thrown into a still pond. In the council chamber, representatives from 12 species watched holographic displays that showed the stabilization attempt in real time. The mathematics involved were beyond most of their understanding, but the visual representation was clear enough. Humanity was attempting to cage a cosmic force that could destroy entire solar systems. Field strength at 40% and climbing, Chen reported, reading data transmitted from the Discovery. Dark matter stress indicators are beginning to stabilize. Velthara's crystal form flickered with rapid calculations. The energy requirements for this operation, they exceed anything in our theoretical models. Human fusion reactors operate at higher efficiency rates than standard Confederation technology, Chen replied. Our ships were designed for long-term deep space operations without refueling. What she didn't mention was that those same reactors had been built with this exact scenario in mind. For 10 months, human engineers had been preparing for the possibility that they would need to power equipment that had never been tested outside of computer simulations. 60% field strength, Elena reported from the Discovery. We're seeing positive resonance patterns in the dark matter structure. On the display screens, the chaotic energy signatures around the asteroid belt began to smooth out. The wild fluctuations that indicated impending collapse were gradually being replaced by stable, controlled patterns, but the process was taking everything the human ships had to give. Warning, called out Elena's chief engineer. Reactor temperatures are approaching critical levels on all vessels. We're pushing beyond safe operational parameters. Elena watched the readouts and made the kind of decision that defined humanity's approach to impossible problems. Maintain field strength. Push the reactors to 110% if necessary. Ma'am, if the reactors fail, we lose 4 ships, Elena interrupted. If we don't maintain field strength, we lose everything within 50 light years. Push them. The human ships groaned under the strain of operations they weren't designed to handle. But they held together, because human engineering built things to last and human crews knew how to make the impossible work. 80% field strength, Elena reported. Dark matter resonance is approaching stable configuration. In the council chamber, alien representatives watched in silent amazement as primitive human technology accomplished something their advanced civilizations had never even attempted. 90%, Elena continued. Dark matter structure is stabilizing. We're seeing coherent patterns throughout the formation. Velthara's calculations confirmed what the sensors were showing. The humans were actually doing it. They were preventing a cosmic catastrophe through sheer determination and engineering excellence. 100% field strength achieved, Elena announced. Dark matter structure has reached stable configuration. The collapse threat has been neutralized. The council chamber erupted in sounds that passed for celebration among 12 different species. Energy beings pulsed with relief. Crystal forms rang with harmonic joy. Even the Mortani made what might have been pleased gurgling sounds, but Chen remained seated, her expression calm. Around her, the alien representatives slowly realized that something had fundamentally changed in the balance of galactic politics. The luminal session leader floated forward, their energy forms shimmering with what might have been humility. Commander Chen, they said, the Confederation owes humanity a debt that cannot easily be repaid. No debt was incurred, Chen replied. We acted according to our principles and our capabilities. Cortez swirled closer, their 1,000 voices speaking in unison. You saved our people, 2.5 million lives that would have been lost without human intervention. More than that, Velthera added, their crystal form flickering with complex emotions. You prevented a catastrophe that would have destroyed multiple systems, including our primary fleet base. Chen stood up slowly, and for the first time in 10 months, every representative in the chamber paid complete attention to her words. The Confederation suggested that humanity should observe and learn before presuming to contribute to galactic civilization, she said, her voice carrying across the silent chamber. We followed that advice. We observed. We learned. And when the time came, we acted. She paused, letting that sink in. What we observed was that advanced technology means nothing without wisdom. Superior computational abilities are useless without the humility to consider other perspectives, and thousands of years of experience become worthless when pride prevents you from listening to new ideas. The aliens shifted uncomfortably, but Chen wasn't finished. What we learned was that humanity has something to offer the galaxy, not despite our emotional nature and short lifespans, but because of them. We see dangers you miss because we don't assume we know everything. We act quickly when necessary, because we understand that sometimes there isn't time for extended deliberation, and we help others, even when they treat us with contempt, because our brief lives have taught us that every individual matters. Velthara spoke into the silence that followed. We underestimated you. Yes, Chen agreed. You did. You assumed that because we were new to galactic civilization, we had nothing valuable to contribute. You mistook our patience for weakness, our willingness to wait for inability to act. She looked around the chamber, meeting the gaze of each representative. But we were never waiting to become powerful enough to help you. We were waiting for you to become wise enough to let us. The implications of her words spread through the chamber like ripples through water. Every alien representative understood what Chen was really saying. Humanity had possessed the knowledge and capability to prevent this disaster from the beginning. They had tried to warn the Confederation through proper channels, following every protocol and procedure. And when those warnings were ignored, they had prepared to save everyone anyway. The mining rights to Sector 77 Alpha, Cortez said suddenly. We would like to offer joint partnership with humanity in future operations. That's very generous, Chen replied. But humanity has already identified 17 other gravitonium-rich systems that don't require mining near dark matter concentrations. We'd be happy to share those coordinates with the Confederation. Another silence fell over the chamber. The humans had found better alternatives and hadn't mentioned them during the original mining rights discussion. Why didn't you tell us about these other systems 10 months ago? Asked the Luminol. Chen's smile was small but significant. You told us to wait and observe, so we did. We waited for you to ask for our help instead of our submission. We observed how you treated species you considered inferior. And we learned exactly what kind of partners you would be. She gathered her materials and prepared to leave the chamber. The next time humanity offers to contribute to a Confederation project, she said as she reached the door, I suggest you listen. We might just save your lives again. As the chamber doors closed behind her, Chen allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. It had taken 10 months, but the aliens finally understood what they were dealing with. Humanity had been waiting. But not for permission to act. They had been waiting for the right moment to show the galaxy what humans were really capable of. That moment had finally come.